Hi, it's working. Okay. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. And then in the last session, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different compared to what has been debating today, called socially aware natural language processing. There was this very thought-provoking question for this workshop. For natural language processing, where we are at, where should we be, and how should we get there? You know the default these days is to go to ChatGPT 4 days ago. Okay, here is what it generates. Currently, NLP is a rapidly developing field that has made significant progress in recent years. Still room for improvement. I highlight a few that seem very relevant to what I'm doing, and that means something. Okay, understand the complexity of human language. Additionally, there will need to be a greater focus on making NLP systems more widely accessible and user-friendly so that they can be used by a wider range of people and organizations. This also aligns a little bit with what Ed Hovey mentioned for the big directions of human-computer interaction. So I feel very calmed down at this moment. I do not need to talk about this figure. This is not enumerative, only a subset. We know that NLP has entered this new age, whether we like it or not. Despite those tremendous progress we are seeing these days, there are still a lot of arising issues reported with current deep models. As we can see, culture, hate speech, bias, those issues really hinder the practical adoption of those systems. And even with ChatGPT, the login page shows that may occasionally generate incorrect information, may produce harmful instructions or biased content. It seems still very challenging, even for a state-of-the-art model today. So I want to think about this. For all the specific phenomena we see so far around low-resource language, bias, hate speech, limited social understanding, the generalized issues are actually about the lack of awareness towards underrepresented groups, culture, ideology, social norm, and social context. Taken all together, the common theme is what I call social awareness. Social awareness, I think, compared to named entity recognition, dependency parsing, this is underrated today because it's really hard to capture. However, it's very essential and necessary to be well studied as one potential direction for the NLP future. Okay, so my research is to think about how we could incorporate the social awareness into NLP. So if you think about, we have linguistic and computation for NLP systems, and it's working very well. However, it ignored the fact that language is used by people to achieve different communicative goals. It's people with diverse social background who produce and consume language. If we ignore people, ignore who says a sentence in what context, we are going to ignore the possibilities we could have as a field. So this is my research, very socially aware NLP. I also want to give a formal definition here of what I mean by socially aware NLP. So here, I call it the study and the development of language technologies from a social perspective. Let's first look at the process of what we call classic NLP pipeline. Typically, we have some task inspired by linguistic knowledge, and then we build and evaluate the models for this task. So for socially aware NLP, there are this set of social factors from social science, social psychology that we could incorporate into this pipeline. Specifically, social factors can inspire socially informed task, new task. Additionally, social knowledge can be used to enrich representation learning in those models. With such integration, we could produce social impact, which is not only about the typical task evaluation, but also about its impact on people. So now you may wonder, okay, what are social factors? They seem vague. To define social factors, let's first look at some theories in linguistics and social science. So there are systemic functional linguistics, there are cooperative principle, and also a lot of social science theories around the interaction, communication, language interaction. Built on those theories, my collaborator, Dirk Hovey, and I, we proposed a set of organized and practical, easy-to-use social factors that could enable NLP systems with social awareness. So as I mentioned, this provides a very easy-to-use conceptual taxonomy on different social factors in language, including who is the speaker, who is the receiver, what's their social relation, in what context, guided by what type of norm, value, culture, or ideology, and for what kind of communicative goals. To give you an example, social relation, we are familiar with it. It refers to the relation between the speaker and the receiver of a message, such as friendship, seniority, competitor, etc. Like in this utterance, if used between friends, it might be banter. If used between strangers on the street, it might be a threat. Social norm is also not new to us. So if we think about this specific sentence, slurping and making noise while eating, depending on the specific context, it might be perceived as polite, respect, or rude. So we really need this context to understand norms and values, and this turns out to be a big challenge for our ChatGPT and a lot of these value alignment systems. Another example is context. Context is what I understand as a container where language interaction happens. It could be the domain, could be the language topic. Like in this example, that was a sick performance. Depending on the specific context, it may have different meanings. So now we know what the social factors to consider for socially aware NLP. Why is this hard, and what are some fundamental challenges? There are a lot of them, so here I summarized 3 prioritized challenges. The first one is how could we formulate those socially informed tasks and create resources that can reflect user needs. The second aspect is how to design models specific to socially informed tasks by incorporating those social factors for richer representation. The third is that if we take into account the different social factors and the socially aware design, how could we build or make a real-world impact with responsibility out of our NLP systems? So I'm not going to talk too much about all the challenges. And instead, I want to share 3 recent work that touch on those social dimensions to give you an idea of what a socially aware NLP means. So the first part, I want to talk about how we formulate a task informed by social factors. And this is a recent work done by my students on culture and dialect use with the goal of building dialect-inclusive natural language processing. So as we all know that all natural language follow a systematic set of rules, and all natural language experience variations. It could be from different regions, etc. As a result, there comes with dialect, which is defined as a group of systematic variations in a language. I do not need to emphasize this more, but we saw that existing language technologies struggle with dialect recognition, dialect-related tasks. So as you can see, for this linguistic prejudice, it has been shown in speech recognition systems, in hate speech detection system, etc. So those are all the real issues that NLP need to solve, and it could affect many end users. So why is dialect hard for today's NLP? So if we take English as a case study, which we think that we already have a lot of resources. Here I want to mention that inclusion requires curation beyond the standard American English, and a lot of those dialect data got filtered out during the pre-training process as low quality. And if you simply combine those, it often harms performance. So to kind of mitigate this potential disparity between dialects, my group has been building this effort called value. The goal here is that how could we build a dialect-specific stress test? How could we create a reliable benchmark that reflect language use? And how could we develop plug-and-play open tools to facilitate future research? So far, we have been working with a set of English dialects, including African American vernacular English, Chicano English, Indian English, Singapore English, multiple of them. So the goal is that we are going to create synthetic morphosyntax transformations covering known or pervasive syntactic variations of around 50 dialects. So this type of approach is actually very beneficial for multiple reasons. First, this is not a black box, because we can easily source transformations to specific feature rules and trace their effects. We can interpret the impact of specific linguistic attributes and structures on model performance. Second, it's very flexible. Since we are going to do this synthetic transformation, our method is very flexible, as we can easily tune the feature density at a very fine-grained level. It's also very scalable. We can easily transform new data sets and expand our analysis to new NLP tasks as they are released. It's also very responsible. So during specific tasks, we take a participant design approach from the HCI field with members of, so here for African American vernacular English, we actually work with Black community in Atlanta to incorporate the interest and the feedback of stakeholders in the construction process. So to give you a quick glance of how that works, we take sentences from standard American English and then perform morphosyntax and a lexicon translation based on linguistic knowledge. And then we end up with something synthetic in the middle. We then work with native speakers to validate and rewrite them into something in their dialect format. So through this process, we can create stress test examples. By combining both linguistic knowledge and the speaker input, we hope that this line of value could be made in a way that's both linguistically profound and also socially acceptable by their speakers. Finally, our approach is generalizable, so we can actually work on many dialects, many tasks at one time. To give you, again, a quick example here. So if we take any big models, this here I use Roberta on sentiment analysis data set. As we can see, if we have models trained on standard American English and use them on value stress test, we see that the performance drop. And actually, it drops for almost every data set in the glue benchmark. And then for daily interaction tasks, such as question answering, if we do transformation to the questions, we see a much bigger drop here. And if you just fine-tune on this dialect data, it actually didn't help a lot. The other goal under this value effort is that we want to achieve this adapting models trained on standard American English to other English varieties. So here, the key idea is to develop a task-agnostic dialect adaptation, which we also call TADA here. And then also use composable techniques to improve robustness across tasks without a retraining. To give you a quick example of how we achieve this, we also mentioned like dialect and the prompts today during earlier talks. So here, we actually leverage this type of prompt tuning where we design this yellow prompt here as VP, like a different type of virtual prompt to capture dialect-specific information. And then the big model is frozen during the learning process. We only learn these different dialect representations specific to a given dialect. As we can see, compared to just this kind of Roberta, having this dialect adaptation improve the model performance, even only using a very, very small amount of parameter size here. And such improvement is consistent across other global data sets, but also across Squad and many others we have been experimenting with. So the final goal, which we hope to release later this month, is for these value transformation sets that work for more than 5 dialects. We also have this goal, the value benchmark, which we will release on Hugging Face together with all these pre-trained value models. So that's the first part. The second part, okay, there is an I missing here. It's about interacting with socially aware models. Interaction is something that I feel very important, especially given all these kind of prompting techniques. And it also goes to something related to all the objectives we have been talking about or thinking about. So on the left, I have a lot of what we call very classic objectives for NLP systems, where we have accuracy, we have performance, we have efficiency, we may have out-of-domain generalization, etc. On the other side, I have a few keywords that's very important when I think about the social awareness here. We have usability, we have engagement, we have interaction here. If we apply NLP algorithm to all these kind of socially aware tasks, here are the key challenges. We have unseen data. Sometimes we need to make it adaptive to users and contexts. We need to provide explanations. We want to know who to hold accountable when there is any errors happening. There are unpredictable model behaviors as well. From the other direction, if I think about a lot of those socially aware or socially innovative tasks, sometimes it's really hard to articulate what can be done by current systems or what cannot be done by current systems. There are also this kind of technical feasibility we have been talking about. There might be prototype challenge because in design or in this kind of HCI, it's so easy to kind of come up with one specific design, but we want to test how well it works. This is always a very long cycle. There might be open-ended feedback from this social domain that we may not know how to incorporate into the model design. To kind of experiment this or to think about this further, I have been working on hate speech detection for some time. And I was thinking about this black box model from an end user perspective. So for people who are making posts online, moderation means that if you have an input, it might be associated with the output of whether your post is delayed or not. So could we make this process more transparent for end users? To kind of work on this, instead of building more accurate classifier, which we have been doing for detecting hate speech target, all sorts of things, we did a design here. That is, we invited people who have experience with online toxicity to help us think about how to design a system. So here, we actually designed an interactive tool called the Recast. So based on user feedback, we make it very interpretable. That is, we provide explanations of comment removal. We also kind of make the interface very minimum to kind of ensure those visualizations are not overwhelming. We provide reinforcement feedback. We make it accessible, etc. Here is how the system looked like. It was a web plug-in. When you input a specific message, we highlight which words might be potentially problematic, which phrase might be problematic, based on all this kind of attention gradient-based interpretation. And then we also suggest potential words to use. So far, it works very well. And when we run different type of user evaluation, such as giving a short video about this system and ask people to follow this, to write something, or to comment on a news article, etc. We found that people like this system. Over 70% users agree that this system helps reduce toxicity, and around 80% people think recast help them understand how toxicity detection works. This looks great. However, if we look at the potential toxicity in those rewrite content, we found that although the toxicity as detected through models are reduced, if you look at this real toxicity provided by a third-party annotators, it actually has slight increase here. So what happens is that people game with the system. They write more toxic behaviors that bypass current tools. They write it in a way that's so implicit that's really hard to detect given the context there. As a follow-up of those, we actually work on this implicit hate speech. That is, we look at all this hateful content without using any explicit keywords, such as this irony or sarcasm for hate speech, or incitement of violence, where you don't use any of the specific words there, etc. So from this work, I really get into this interactive nature of NLP systems. That is, if we could make the systems interactive, maybe we could learn from such interaction to better improve the models, to better improve the data set, to better improve the dissemination of such systems. This idea is not new. So if you look at a lot of the adversary data generation, there was actually an earlier work that visualized what's happening in the system, and then users rewrite it based on those visualizations to create a more adversary QA examples here. You can also use it in a good way. For example, there is a recent work called Co-author, where human and AI collaborate to write something together. And it was demonstrated that with this collaboration paradigm, we actually have more diverse, more, I guess, higher quality content here. Again, this designing, evaluating, or learning from interactions is something that you also see a lot with current ChatGPT or all sorts of models. I'm running this workshop on story shared and lesson learned at EMLP. Yesterday, when I was trying to advertise this on Twitter, I asked GP3, actually ChatGPT, giving this content. So I pasted the first paragraph of my workshop. Please write a tweet to call for participation in an Elon Musk tone. So as you can see, it's actually very, very impressive. Attention, all NLP rebels and inventors, join us at the workshop and help us push the boundary of human language understanding. Share your bold ideas and breakthroughs, and let's change the world together. So very, very nice. So the backend is actually, as we read from their blog, is this kind of learning from human preference, reinforcement learning paradigm. So this kind of interactive nature, to me, seems to be a very cool directions to pursue. In the last part, I'm going to talk about something that I also think is going to be a key dimension, that is more around the translational impact. How could we support language interaction in key domains? One of the work I did is to take all the fancy NLP techniques that I have learned to see how could we go into the real world. And actually, my experience in this direction revealed that if we put NLP into the real world context, we get to know more about the power of language and how much benefits it could produce for the outside world. So one thing we did is we collaborated with American Cancer Society. They have this website called the Cancer Survivor Network. We got access to a really huge data dump for many years. And then what we did is we look at the language people use there. We identify emotional support, informational support, all sorts of exchanges people made on the website, and then identify what are their specific social roles, like revealed by their language. So we have people who provide emotional support, people who are newcomer welcomers, people who share stories, people who are knowledge promoters, etc. We then kind of leverage those social roles we learned to better support the patient communication, where we match people based on the content, based on whether they are looking for emotional support with appropriate caregivers, etc. We deployed the system on the left side of CSN, so when a user logs in, they will see the thread we recommended to them based on their needs, based on their posting histories, as well as the people expert, caregivers, informational expert we match them with. So during the 1-year intervention time period, we have over 11,000 people who signed up, used this intervention. And we see that this type of content-based recommendation based on their support provision history increase people's reading. So now this kind of direction still excites me a lot. That is, giving all these kind of large pre-trained models, how could we use them for something more translational? So here I pick the skill training as one example. That is, given the powerful potential of those big models, how could we allow users to experiment with different situations simulated by those big models? And how could we provide on-demand feedback to improve conversation skill? So one of such skill is what we call positive thinking skill. The goal here is that how could we help people achieve positive benefits induced by language? We call this task positive reframing. Okay, let's just take an example here. Let's say many of us have this issue. I absolutely hate making decisions. I found myself having a lot of those to make. We have style transfer. Here's what a style transfer will give you. I absolutely love making decisions. I found myself having a lot of those to make. You won't be supported by this message because it kind of provides this contradiction here going on. We could do better than style transfer. So in the positive reframing part, we kind of rewrite in a way that we maintain the semantic equivalence, but shift the focus from something negative to something more positive. So here I have a lot of decisions to make. It'll become easier once I start to get used to it. Then you can actually leverage either GPT-2 or GPT-3 to do this kind of automatic reframing. We have something like, it's such a hot day, get converted into this hot weather, make it perfect for ice cream. It actually goes beyond this. We utilize it in the context of counseling, which I'm going to talk about right now. Before that, I want to mention that although the system was working perfectly on the training data or on the test set, you still see this very superficial or shortcut as we observed. For example, there is this like one fits all sentence like, but I'm strong and I know I can handle it, to every rewrite we encountered. As I mentioned, so now we are using similar technique to kind of help therapy skill training here. As we all know that under treatment of mental health remains a key issue, and then peer-to-peer counseling seems to be a good alternative. But the training therapist or training supporters, even every of us, could be very costly, and traditional approach cannot scale. So what we did is we look at all sorts of counseling conversations and try to understand what are the counseling strategies experts use. So we based on this framework from psychotherapy called the motivational interviewing strategies. As we can see, there are many of them. We continue fine-tuning large language models to the context of mental health. As we can see, this type of continue fine-tuning actually improve the performance a lot. Not only in terms of performance improvement, we are trying to leverage those strategies to better help people, especially beginner therapists, at a skill in their training environment. So basically what we are doing right now is we are generating feedback to help people navigate or deal with current situations. So this is all in a simulated environment, which means that before people talking to real patients, they will practice their skill in this simulated environment where we give feedback. We give feedback at different levels or assistance. First, diagnose which skill to use, like here, show empathy. We provide suggestions, like try to be supportive and show understanding. We also highlight example response that people could use, such as, sounds like you are going through a challenging time. So we provide a different level of assistance in the process of training. And here is a demo. I heard that a live demo never works, so let's see. Okay, so this is the current interface. So basically for a message having from the member side, the counselor will see this kind of recommendation from our system. This is actually generated on the fly. So we can see there are support, close the question they can use. And whenever they click something, they can also edit that. This is actually running right now, and our first stage user interview and with domain expert show that people like this type of interaction, and it's actually working very well. After we remove a lot of or deal with a lot of ethical considerations. Okay, so that's what I want to share here. So how could we formulate a task informed by social factors, interacting with socially aware models, and then use those socially aware models for translational impact? I'm very excited about this socially aware NLP direction, and to me, I feel like it serves a bridge for many purposes. First is that it creates a bridge between task and people, so we could have more human-centered NLP tasks informed by social factors that we can use. Second, it serves as a bridge between those model and the social interaction. So we can actually integrate the social factors into those model design for enriched representation. I don't have a great solution, but this is at least one direction to think about. And then the last part is how could we bridge the evaluation, the real-world impact divide, which I call here. That is, how could we conduct translational work in socially aware NLP with responsibility for social impact? And to kind of answer the question of where is the future of NLP, from a personal perspective, I think in the future, we hope the NLP systems could be more socially aware, be aware of all the social factors, and be more interactive, so we can actually interacting with it, even we are not NLP experts, and also kind of be more translational, adapting to different domains and produce real-world impact. With that, thank you, and happy to take questions.
Questions? Yes.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. I just have a quick question regarding your hate speech model. So how does it go about detecting sentences that have low toxicity, or classifying sentences that have low toxicity, but that are inherently sexist? For example, let's say benevolent sexism. So I'm surprised at how smart you are for a girl. This is like has a positive connotation, but is underlying a sexist or a hate speech sentence. This is the first question. The second question, referencing Professor Barbara's presentation. So hate speech is like, to me, maybe a large umbrella that encompasses a lot of linguistic theories. Couldn't categorizing the various forms of hate speech into the even subtypes, so benevolent sexism, hostile sexism, in a way decrease the inter-rater disagreement? So when you have a large umbrella such as a hate speech in general, one might look at the sentence I just said and say that, no, that's positive, that might not be. But if you have a very clear guideline of the various types, it might decrease the subjectivity or disagreement. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. So for your first question, like a microaggression or this kind of stereotype in a very subtle way, that's exactly the reason why we want to create that interactive system. Because actually for many users, we use language without realizing the potential impact it might have on others. That's why we see this task is very subjective. So in the interactive system we designed, you can actually plug in any type of detection system. So here, I only use toxicity detection as a way to show how you could actually make it work in this interactive fashion, and then design like rigorous user studies to study that. But you can actually plug it with this microaggression. There was a great paper from Yulia at UW where they define microaggression, which you can actually utilize it in a similar way, because all the interpretability work, we leverage off-the-shelf interpretation and then visualize it through that interface. So we can actually visualize those very subtle things. So we have this kind of very game effect we have, but without that, the original goal was to kind of implement that as a web plugin. So think about people on Reddit, they could see these potential highlights just like Grammarly, and then be more aware of their language use. And then for your second question, so yes, you are right. So hate speech is a giant umbrella. I don't think we solve the space. The implicit hate speech actually is what I think a great dimension, or I guess a very different dimension into that space. Because if you look at a lot of the research, we look at the racial identifier, we look at explicit swear words use, but there are actually this bigger scope of we actually don't use those, and people can still make a hateful comment. So, and those are very dangerous speech I listed, such as incitement of violence. That type of thing, no matter the background or whatever, I think it's still that's like what I think the category that should have very, very high agreement. With regard to like relative subjective categories, I totally agree with what Barbara mentioned this morning, that we need to really understand annotators, having their annotations, understand their disagreement, and then consider what we mean when we make a prediction.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Magna.
Hi, it was a very nice presentation, very nice talk, thank you. So I had a question, can you please go back to the slide where you were talking about style transfer?
Okay.
Yeah. So what I understood by this, like you are just trying to change the hateful word, is it so? Or you are trying to formalize it? So what is it here in this particular slide?
Yeah, so this is a new task, which we want to help people express their thoughts in a very positive way. So we call this task positive reframing. So the idea is that if you have something negative, we want to frame it in a positive way, but keep the semantic equivalence of the event you are talking about. And this is something that the current system can't deal with. So if you have style transfer, it only changes the words into opposite meaning. So you end up with something that reads positive, but also it changes this user's original attitude towards it. Versus in this version we provide, we actually maintain the same event, but try to shift the focus from the negative side to positive side. So I didn't mention a lot about the implication here, but we're also working with people in education domain where they use similar technique to help teachers reframe their language into more supportive when interacting with kids, like during elementary school.
Is it similar to hate normalization?
This work has not much connection to hate speech.
Oh, all right. So follow-up question with this is, have you also tried this with implicit hate speech? Like, I have seen hate normalization with explicit hate basically, so it is much easier. But when we talk about implicit hate, it is difficult to identify the particular span and then change it. So what is your say on it, on like how can we do that in future?
Yep. I didn't present it, but in the original implicit hate paper, we also talk about how could we explain the prediction there. So we basically produce generation of the implicature of that language, and then you can also leverage interpretability technique to visualize the potential string, etc. So we actually have more experiments in the original paper.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Zirak.
Hey, Diyi. Okay, this is sort of a big question, so I don't know if I'm expecting a good answer to it. You present a couple of tasks that are potentially questionable to reframe in, right? So hate speech is one, where it's like, well, like you see, people game your system to become more creative in how they're hateful. But let's say that people don't do that. Let's say that the system works. People say, yes, we will accept these rewrites as to make it less toxic. But imagine it's a fascist who's doing that, right? So they make their language more palatable. There are some limits to when we should be helping people, right? And when we should have the systems be interactive. And where do you think those limits are, and how do you think we need to address that?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So when we design the system, we actually think more than what I present today. We think about what could go wrong with this potential system, especially for social domain. A lot of the system we design, they are used by end users who are directly affected by that. So in those scenarios, we really need to think about what if the research leaves the lab, what could go wrong, what are some mitigation plans, etc. So that's the philosophy we actually follow for each of the work I mentioned here. So with regard to that interactive visualization system, several dimensions. First is that we actually give people like full disclosure of how this kind of system work. We have this kind of consent where we hope they can use this in a more beneficial way. So think about how this could help you with uncertain situations, etc. We also have the potential log of when people kind of interacting with the system. We want to kind of potentially audit what's happening there to see what the potential problematic behavior might demonstrate in that process if they use it in a bad way. Okay, those are more from the mitigation perspective. The other thing is whether we should help people with this type of task. So think about moderation. Moderation today is done automatically. For a lot of end users, the content gets removed without any explanation. From their side, it's very helpful so that they can get some interpretation of what's happening. And that was actually the need finding I didn't present in my talk, but we actually have the pre-stage where we talk to a lot of people to figure out what do they really need, and their needs driven the system design. So it's actually after a balance of the benefits we could gain from the system and then the potential risk. So a lot of those is not a binary answer of, okay, we should do it or we shouldn't do it. It's more about how could we do it in a relative responsible way after taking into account so many different privacy ethical considerations.
Yeah, very quick question.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and great work. Regarding the hate speech, we mentioned that there's multiple types of bias, sexism, or racism. What are thoughts about the evaluation methods? So right now, the evaluation method do not consider bias or debiased model, right? And it just get the results, and it does not consider the biasing. So it's not reflected on the evaluation measure. Though, what do you think that should be done to mitigate this gap?
Yeah, that's also a great question. So in terms of hate speech, in terms of other type of systems, we see these bias issues. And that's actually one of the reasons why we really want to have more work in this kind of socially aware direction, because we really need to understand the context. Who is the user there? Who is the receiver there? And what's their social relation? So think about use toxicity as an example here. You need to understand the context to make a fair prediction. The example I showed to you earlier in the presentation where we talk about social relations. So a potential problematic sentence might be okay if used between close friends, and shouldn't be okay if used in other contexts. So as you can see, there are a lot of contextualized factors we really need to consider. And these kind of social factors provide a potential lens in terms of how we could better understand the context in order to have more comprehensive and fair understanding of the space. The other thing is that you could also use those social factors as a way to visualize or audit existing models. For example, for a model, could we break it down when it comes to evaluation metric across different groups, across different kind of dialects, etc. So yeah, I think it's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again.